Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thanks for joining today's webinar focused on tools for finding and assessing farmland. This webinar is brought to you by New Entry Sustainable Farming Project and Land for Good and is made possible by generous support from the Northeast Extension Risk Management Education Center. Our webinar is to run about an hour and 15 minutes. We are going to cover a lot of material in that time, so be prepared to feel it and take note of your questions as they come up. We're going to start today with just a quick technical orientation, an overview of New Entry Sustainable Farming Project's mission and programs, and then we'll dive into the meat of the webinar, starting with Kathy Ruhf, who's the Senior Program Director at Land for Good, and we'll be talking about how to assess a potential farm property. I will then discuss various tools that are available to help you identify potential farmland and to assess soils. I, by the way, am Noelle Fogg. I'm the Farmland Matching Service Coordinator here at New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. Finally, we'll hear from Ben Waterman, who is the new Farmer Program Coordinator at the UVM Extension Center for Sustainable Agriculture. Ben will be discussing farmland rental rates and tools that you can use to help you determine rental rates. And we'll end with about 10 minutes for a question and answer session for all webinar participants. All right, so that's all for the technology orientation. Now I'd like to tell you just a little bit about New Entry Sustainable Farming Project as the host of today's webinar and why we're hosting this webinar. So New Entry Sustainable Farming Project is a nonprofit organization. We're based in Lowell and Boston, Massachusetts. We were founded in 1998. Our mission is to improve our local and regional food systems by training the next generation of farmers to produce food that is sustainable, nutritious, and culturally appropriate, and making the food accessible to individuals regardless of age, mobility, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. In doing this work, we provide training, career development, and economic opportunity to new farmers. So our programs include a farm business planning course, a farm training and incubator program, and the World Peas CSA, which aggregates produce from beginning farmers for sale to hundreds of CSA customers throughout the Boston area. New Entry also organizes livestock field schools and manages a mobile poultry processing unit. And our Farmland Matching service is the proud host of today's webinar. So our New Entry's Farmland Matching service assists farmers with locating, evaluating, and matching farmers to farmland in Massachusetts and in the surrounding region. On the other side of the coin, we also work with landowners who would like to see their land farmed by helping them understand the basics of farmland leasing and helping them find the right farmer and farm business for them and their land. The Farmland Matching Service also works directly with communities and municipalities to identify unused viable farmland, reach out to farmland owners, and increase active agriculture. It sounds like somebody is off of mute. If you could please re-mute yourself, I'd be very appreciative. One last thing I'd like to point out before we move on to today's webinar is that New Entry has a number of resources in our Farmer Resource Library online. You can see the link at the top here, including written guides on multiple plot farming, finding, assessing, and securing farmland, and the use of GIS mapping for discovering underutilized farmland. All right, and without further ado, I'm now going to turn it over to Kathy Ruhf to talk about assessing farmland. Give me one moment, Kathy, and I will unmute you. All right, there we go. And now you should have the ball, Kathy.
Thanks, Noelle. Let's see if I can get to my slide. There we go. Hi, everybody. It's Kathy Ruhf. As Noelle mentioned, I'm with Land for Good, which is a New England nonprofit devoted exclusively to finding to land access, tenure, and transfer, helping farm seekers, landowners, and transitioning farmers. We've been doing this work for about a decade, and today the focus is on assessing land to farm, and I am going to talk to you a little bit about some of the considerations. So it seems to me that if you're on this call, you're actively thinking about or helping people to acquire land to farm, and my hope would be that you all have done or helped farmers do some initial exploration and education about what the right tenure option is before you're actually looking for land to farm, and how that piece of farm land will meet your personal, family, and business objectives. So the basic choices are to purchase or to rent, and there are many variations among those two basic choices. For today, we're going to talk about how to think about or assess that piece of land or that farm, whether or not you are purchasing, renting, or thinking about a path to ownership, for example. And today, what I'm going to cover are these key areas for assessment: location and community, the land base itself, infrastructure, housing, which, as many of you know, is one of the key challenges. It may be you find a great piece of land, but if you can't live at or near it, it's not going to work. The history of the property sometimes plays an important role, and there may be other considerations as well. So the question for me, if I were a seeker, would be, what's the driver? Are any of these factors either the limiting factor, a particular constraint, or something that overrides everything else? In thinking about the driver, to me, it's also really helpful to think about what are the priorities. And this little sort of grid is useful to farm seekers to think about what's necessary, what's desirable, and what's optional in each of these categories. And we actually have a worksheet where you can, use this in a way to say, for example, it might be necessary for you to have soils appropriate to growing vegetables. It might not be necessary, but it might be desirable to have a packing shed. You could do without, you could build one. It might be optional to have a view or a house that has a second bathroom, but those would be much less of a driver. So to think about those categories in your prioritizing the assessment of a particular property or properties. So now we'll take a look at just unpacking a little bit some of the features in each one of those categories. Location obviously plays a really key role, not only where it is in the universe, but also where it is particularly in terms of, do you have adequate access for you, for cars, for equipment, and do you have ease of entry and right of entry onto that property? So we talk about farmland access as a big sort of overarching concept, but this is actually physical access. Along with that goes some of the other physical attributes, whether or not you need the property to be visible for a farm stand, for example, and whether you welcome passing traffic or whether you don't welcome passing traffic. I've had young farmers approach me saying, well, they found this perfect piece of property, they bought it, they thought they wanted to do direct marketing and set up this farm stand, and it turned out they really hated direct marketing, and they were very uncomfortable with all the road traffic, and they did not make a good choice. So it's really important to match up the property that you're thinking about with your business objectives. All of you are farmers, so you know to think about some of the climate features, and you can look up some of those. You also would be well advised to ask people in the neighborhood and to really get a sense of not only what the macro climate is, but what some of the microclimates are on any particular property. The kinds of support services that you will need and the distance you're willing to travel or have people travel to you can be really important, whether it's a vet, whether it is any custom work that you need done, whether you do your own repairs or whether you need somebody close at hand, may be a make or break situation for you. Similarly, with access to markets, depending on how you market, this often comes up because a lot of particularly beginning farmers, but also established farmers do or want to do direct marketing. And if that's true, then your location and distance to markets is important. How this fits into sort of the larger food system issues that we all think about is if farmers are also looking to explore or willing or preferring to do to market not directly, in other words, through various wholesale or processing outlets, then it may be okay for you to be a little more distant from a direct market, or if you're you have a milk truck that's willing to come to your farm, the land may be more available and affordable at some distance from the direct market circumference of larger metropolitan areas. Oftentimes it's not obvious whether there are restricted areas on a farm. They could be subject to liens or local regulations or other kinds of restrictions that a landowner might place. For example, that you wouldn't be allowed to come over onto a certain part of the property because of privacy issues. So now we'll talk a little bit more about some of the community aspects of location. And for many farmers, these items are at least as important as the physical attributes, because it is not only your business, it is your life and your lifestyle. And so the neighborhood and the neighbors it's really important to find out about whether the town is farm friendly and what the neighborhood feels like. Are there other farmers around? What is the history of the farming use there, and has it been seen as a positive use by those who surround the property? The larger farming community is really important. There are too many farmers who have sort of lamented to me about feeling isolated. They found a great piece of property that they could afford, but it really put them in a poor situation socially, and it really didn't turn out to be the best for them. Similarly, the services that you need to think about aren't limited to farming services. If you have kids, what about their schools? Is the location to a church or other kinds of community infrastructure important to you? Sometimes, in fact, those are the driver. Certainly, local and state regulations can play a really important part. There are different definitions of agriculture, and especially if you're doing some more innovative or not traditional kinds of farming, you want to make sure that those would be allowed in the community that you're looking at. Wetlands laws differ from state to state and from community to community, and they sometimes quite importantly intersect with farming uses. Similarly, at a local level, anything to do about eligible parking, what kind of signage, what kind of structures, what kind of setbacks from the roads, and whether processing or other kinds of agritainment, all those things, whether they are allowed and may conflict with your business plan or desires. So these are a lot of things to add to your checklist. Most farmers start by thinking about the land base. How do the fields look? How do the soils look? And other presenters today will get into more detail on that. Certainly there are a lot of dimensions, literally and figuratively, to assessing fields and the soil types. And thinking back onto that necessary, desirable, optional, it may be desirable for you to find a property with really good soils, but it might also be possible over time to build those soils or build some of the soils on some of the fields, depending on your use and your time frame. Details such as topography and orientation, again, with respect to light and microclimates is important, and certainly nothing is more important than access to water and what is available either from built structures or from the natural environment. Can you access it, and what are the limitations? Farm layout, especially access to fields, proximity between fields and buildings, the amount of roads and the concept of maintaining roads, and is it efficient for your purposes? A farm may be very beautiful, but just not practical because of how it is designed, and whether that's something that you can amend whether you purchase it or through a rental agreement, would be something that you would need to pay a lot of attention to. There could be other sensitive features on the property that may enhance the property or may be a constraint. Certain states and locales have overlays for sensitive habitat, endangered species, historic features. Sometimes the landowner really would like to have a farmer on, but the farmer has to respect certain historic stone walls, for example, or other features. Archaeological sites sometimes come into play. So it's not always what meets the eye. Some farmers care a lot about what's growing there and are there invasives and if they're possible to manage. Also, farmers may be interested in timber or woodlot or sugar bush, so it's not just the fields that you would be looking at. Infrastructure, talked a little bit about this already. What are the water sources? What is the quality of the water? Is the water metered or can it be metered? Especially in situations where you might be sharing a property with a landowner or other farmers. How is the use and the cost of the water monitored? In some communities, there are agricultural rates for water use. In other communities, there aren't. And so if it's off of municipal water, you know, how much of a factor is that? That in itself could be a driver. Similarly with utilities, are the electric utility options suitable? And again, are they metered? Is there the potential or an existing landline? And also these days, cell reception and internet service can be drivers. Farm structures for certain kinds of enterprises are absolutely essential. Their condition and appearance and what can you do to improve or modify a particular structure. Where are they located on the property? And again, in terms of farm layout, is that useful? Past uses is important. Present uses, especially if they're shared. I've come across several situations where a prospective farming tenant says, well, I'm going to be allowed to use this barn, and the landlord is also going to be using some of it. So that could be fine. It could be a recipe for conflict or at least confusion. So shared uses are part of the possible arrangement that really needs to be spelled out. And of course, there's suitability and potential adaptability for various uses that you might be considering now or in the future. Other kinds of infrastructure that people don't necessarily think about but might play in are the condition and extent and location of farm roads, and if you're renting, who's responsible for their upkeep. I just talked to a farm manager in a relatively urbanized setting outside of Boston, and his major headache right now is snow removal, and that other people's snow is being piled on his farm property. So the location and access is a factor not only for you, but who else has permission or might be using that property. Is there equipment that's available for purchase or rent, and what is its condition and so on, and is that important to you? Perimeter and interior fencing could be great, could be in poor shape. Whose responsibility is it to maintain, and is it necessary for you to have? Woodlot I mentioned, and then again, in terms of this necessary, desirable, and optional, can you build new, particularly on a rental property? This is a big question about not only landowner desires, but who owns the improvement, who pays for it, and so on. And then a lot more questions about alternative energy are coming up. Can you install solar or wind power on the property if that's a strong desire for you? As I mentioned earlier, housing sometimes is a bigger challenge than the property itself. Is it available on the property or near the property? Is it appropriate for your needs? What condition is it? If the property as a whole is affordable, but the farmhouse needs a ton of work. How does that figure in? And what are the options? Can you adapt other structures? I've talked with farmers who, you know, there's a barn which has a second story, or could somebody build a living structure on top of an old greenhouse slab? And these kinds of things have come up, and they can be pretty creative options. It's true for you as a farmer, but also potentially equally important for apprentice or farm labor housing. We don't often think about history. We're so focused on what the land looks like now and where we're going forward. Prior farming uses could be really important, especially for those of you who are looking to be organic or otherwise concerned about the history of your soil. You obviously want to know about that. Underground storage tanks sometimes is a hidden serious problem. I've come across that a couple of times myself, as well as any kinds of chemical or fuel accidents. What kinds of past and present non-farm uses are on this property? And again, if you're not going to be the owner, do they conflict in any way? And then, of course, doing due diligence to see what kinds of encumbrances are on the property and do they make a difference. It's very nice for you to think you have a property and then come to find out that there is a right-of-way, and of course, if you're purchasing property, your lawyer would be doing the title search. But if you're renting a property, it's still a really important thing to do. Oops, let me get my... All right, so that's a really quick and dirty list of many of the factors to consider when assessing a property. What are some of the things to think about in terms of how you might go about doing that? And my fellow speakers will talk about that as well. We encourage farmers to, you know, if you go to several properties, by the time that you've gone to the third one, it's really hard to remember and to keep clear, you know, what was the soil, or was there a southern exposure here, or whatever. So it's good to be organized, really good to take pictures if you can, especially if you're really serious about a property. Take a look at the property at multiple times. As I said before, do your due diligence and take a look at the records in a town hall and with neighbors. That should be a separate bullet, as well as with other farmers. People will talk about soils testing on this webinar, but I also would want to mention water testing for some people. That's really critical as well. There are lots of resources out there, some of which will be talked about today, including the soil survey. It's important to check with the assessors, look at tax maps, get familiar with how to use GIS and the various overlays that are available. Also, don't be afraid to go to local commissions such as conservation and agriculture commissions to learn about the neighborhood and the town, checking with the registry. And oftentimes, if the property has been in active farming, there might be a conservation plan with NRCS. NRCS might also be willing and able to come out to take a look at the property, help you discern some of the soil issues and soil capability options. You might also consult with a private planner as well. I want to tip my hat to Ben Waterman, who has created the farm rental assessment checklist, which is available through their New Farmer page. And even though it's called a farm rental assessment checklist, a lot of these the items on that list pertain to purchase as well. A couple of other resources: Holding Ground, which is available for purchase at smallfarm.org, has a farm assessment checklist, as well as a lot of other information and templates for farmers and for landowners. We at Land for Good have a Farm Seeker Toolbox, which has a lot of materials pertaining to the farm search. And for landowners, there's a pretty comprehensive guide to assessing farmland. I think that could be my almost last slide. So Land for Good, we're easy to find at landforgood.org, and we do have field agents that work directly with beginning farmers, other farm seekers, transitioning farmers, landowners, and communities in each of our New England states. So I think that's my slide. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And I think that I will pass the baton back to Noelle.
Great. Thanks so much, Kathy. So I want to reiterate really quickly that if you have questions for Kathy or for any of us presenters during the presentation, feel free to send them directly to me in the chat window at any time, and we'll address them at the end. All right, so I am going to talk about some various places that you can look to try to find farmland. Most of the resources I'm going to be talking about in this section, by the way, are specific to New England, but that doesn't mean there aren't similar resources in other areas of the country. And then I'm also going to show you a very neat online tool that's a national tool that can help you evaluate a certain level of the soils on a particular parcel. So first off, where to look? There are a number of places to look that may have information about farmland that's available in your community and other communities. I want to start by emphasizing that the more you tell your story of why you want to farm and what kind of land you are looking for, the more people will know about it who may have a good lead for you. The more people you talk to, the better your chances are of finding land. So, a great place to start are with agricultural commissions, which are town committees that represent farming community and promote agricultural economic development. In Massachusetts, ag commission members are appointed by a town's board of selectmen, and they're often made up of established farmers in that town. They often have knowledge of available farmland in town or other nearby towns. Not all towns have this type of committee, in which case your next best bet is likely to speak with the equivalent of your town's conservation commission. So similar to ag commissions, many communities throughout New England have municipal conservation commissions or other entities of the sort that help protect and steward a town's open space and wetlands. They often manage farmland, sometimes even lease it out, or know of available farmland in a given town. Land trusts are nonprofit organizations that work to conserve land in various capacities. They do this by acquiring the land itself, acquiring a conservation easement for the land, or providing oversight for a conservation easement. Many land trusts try to get farmers onto land that they have conserved for ag purposes. The first link here is to the Land Trust Alliance. This is where you can basically find all local land trusts near you throughout the U.S. And the second link here is to a brand new and free farmer's guide to working with land trusts that was put together by the National Young Farmers Coalition. It's a really excellent resource if you decide to pursue the route of approaching the land trust. Your local farm service agency often will have a list of ads from landowners in the area who have land available to rent or to sell. FSA offices are often co-located at your NRCS offices as well. This link here is for the USDA Rural Development and Farm Service Agency resales website. This provides current info about single and multi-family homes and farms and ranches for sale that are for sale by the U.S. Federal government. These are previously owned properties. They're usually for sale by public auction or other method, depending on the property. Anyone can buy a home for sale by the U.S. government, but you do have to work with a real estate agent, broker, or servicing representative to submit an offer or a bid. Perhaps an obvious one here, but definitely not to be overlooked. Sometimes landowners post flyers advertising that they are looking for a farmer tenant on bulletin boards at local farm supply stores or at farm stands. This can also be a good place to post that you are looking for land to farm in a particular area. There are some real estate agents that are knowledgeable about farmland rentals or sales, but this really can be hit or miss. It's probably worth trying to call around to different agencies to ask about what their experience and knowledge of farmland is. And then finally, land link programs. These programs maintain databases of available land opportunities and perform customized searches for farmland seekers in some cases. Some of them are free and some of them charge a fee. And so what I'm going to do now is to talk about some of the main land link programs in New England. So the first is New Entry Sustainable Farming Project's Farmland Matching Service, which I run here. Land for Good, New England Farmland Finder, and New England Land Link. Some state-specific land link programs in our region include Maine Farm Link, Connecticut Farm Link, and Vermont Land Link. These are all very easily found online with just a simple Google search. All of these programs do function a bit differently, like I said earlier. So I'm going to give you two quick examples of the form that they can take. So for first example, New Entry's Farmland Matching Service helps farmland seekers by maintaining an internal database of available land for sale and rent, as well as maintaining a small public map online. We take a very hands-on approach to locating and evaluating farmland and connecting farmers to the land. In making those connections, we are looking to help create and steward appropriate and beneficial relationships for both parties, so both the landowner and the farmer. This obviously requires an understanding of the property itself, location, acreage, the different land tenure options, as well as the landowner's goals, as well as the farmer's proposed enterprise and available assets, of course. In addition to making applicable and appropriate connections between landowners and farmers, we also assist with communication between those two parties, can help conduct site visits, and can help advise on tenure options. New England Farmland Finder, on the other hand, is more of an open source public clearinghouse for basically any and all property owners to post their farmland and for farmland seekers to create accounts and directly contact property owners based on their interest. It's a very simple process to sign up for an account on New England Farmland Finder, and it's usually approved within 24 hours, if not sooner. So definitely encourage all your farmland seekers to sign up and go there as well. All right, so moving on to soil assessment tools. I'm going to give a very brief how-to on using the USDA's Web Soil Survey. So the Web Soil Survey is an online tool that can tell you all sorts of valuable information about a soil, about a particular parcel soil. But first and foremost, I definitely want to note that this tool is not a substitute for a soil sample. You are not going to determine the soil's pH or its cation exchange capacity from this, but it will give you an idea of the main soil types and components that you're going to be dealing with in a given parcel. This can be a good starting point for determining if a parcel might be suitable for vegetable production, pasture, orchard, or something else. So I'm going to switch over my screen really quickly. All right, so you should all be able to see this. This is the Web Soil Survey homepage. You're going to start by clicking on the big green button. Oh, Saturday session, not even that bad. Hopefully it works. There we go. So we're going to start by putting in an address, state, or country. You can make it as specific or as broad as you want. I'm going to start by putting in an address here. Today we're going to look at a piece of property that's in Massachusetts. I'm going to guide you through how to go about putting together the survey. So once you enter the address, just click on View. Great. And so this little hand tool up here is what's going to help you move around and navigate the map. So I'm going to center this piece of land, this parcel here that we're assessing. And you can zoom in or you can zoom out using these little magnifying glasses icon up here. Next, what we want to do is define an area of interest. So in order to do that, we want to click on this little AOI button here, not the one with the square, but the one with a kind of funky shape to it. And we're going to click at every point on the map where we want to define a corner. So I'm going to start up here, click once, draws a line for me, click again at every corner. You don't need to make it exact. You can be very precise about it if you want. In this case, it's going to get the general outline of what looks like the potential farmable portion of this property. To end, double click and it'll create your area of interest. Great, so now what we want to do is go up to these tabs at the top here. We're going to go to the Soil Data Explorer. And there's lots of things you can do in here, as you can see. What we're interested in as farmers is going down to this Land Classifications tab. So we'll press this down arrow here. And then we'll go down to Farmland Classification. Click on that. And then we're going to click View Rating. Great. So as we can see here, there are different soil types here that are defined and outlined in different colors, as well as labeled with different numbers and letters. And if we scroll down, we can see how these are defined. So as you can see, this green portion here is 254B. So it looks like it's about 21.4 acres or so that we've got there. It's Hinkley sandy loam at 3 to 8% slopes, and this is classified as farmland of statewide importance. And I'm going to go into a little bit of the detail on what these different classifications mean in a second. This other portion up here, 245B. Oh, sorry, 245B was the first one. This 254, excuse me, was the first one I was looking at. That looks like it's prime farmland, so that's a score there. That's about 13.8 acres. 245C looks like this little portion up at the top here. And unfortunately, that looks like it is not prime farmland. So these farmland classifications identify areas that are best suited for food, feed, fiber, forage, etc. And each type of soil has certain capabilities, which determines which classification it's going to be in. Prime farmland, it is classified as that, usually has optimum physical and chemical characteristics for and very few limitations for growing agricultural products. In Massachusetts, this means the soil is not very rocky, it's well drained, it's not highly erodible, and it's usually not too acidic. Farmland of statewide importance is sort of the next level down. This land has some limitations for growing, but it still provides an important agricultural resource. This land may have a steeper slope, be stonier, wetter, or have a shorter layer of topsoil than prime farmland, but in most cases the land is still tillable. So what's interesting here in our example is that we've got two different things here that are both Hinkley sandy loam. The only real difference it looks like are the slopes, and that's what's defining it between prime farmland or farmland of statewide importance. The next level down from farmland of statewide importance is defined as farmland of unique importance. This changes from state to state and how they define it. I know that in Massachusetts, this generally refers to areas that are very wet for most of the year and are usually suited for cranberry production more than traditional vegetable production or agriculture of pasture. And then finally, the sort of bottom classification is not prime farmland. So this land probably has pretty significant limitations to its agricultural use. There may be very little topsoil to till, or the soil is very stony. This land still could be valuable for certain agricultural purposes, though, such as pasture land for animals or even a productive woodlot. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our presentation here. And that's it for my section, I believe. So I'm going to turn it over to Ben Waterman here. And hang on one second, Ben, and I will pass you the ball.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Noelle. Yep. It's good to be here. And I will be talking about farmland rental rates, market rates specifically. And we'll talk through some general concepts, and we'll talk using the National Agricultural Statistics Service to research market rental rates. Feel free to contact me anytime after this webinar, and we can, if you have any other questions, I'm available anytime. So first, some general concepts. Market rates are really just benchmarks. They're just one of, using market rates as rental rates is just one of a couple different approaches to determining the right or fair or equitable rental rate. So I just wanted to point you to the resource picture on the right there. This is about a 25-page guide that we developed recently that goes through all of the key considerations and methods for determining equitable farm rental rates. So we go through how to research market rates and what goes into market rates and other approaches for determining the right rental rate, such as using the cost approach. That's a very common approach. For example, using the landowner's ownership costs of owning the property. Oftentimes, landowners want to pass those costs on to a tenant. For example, they know their property taxes. Property taxes are pretty easy costs to assess, and oftentimes landowners want to pass some, if not all, of property tax cost onto the tenant in the form of a lease rate. There's also a net returns to land approach is common, where you have different types of operations with different profit potentials. And if we talk about per acre of land, all different types of farm operations have different profit potentials per acre of land. So vegetable operations, for example, are much higher value operations per unit of land. They can often afford to pay more per unit of land for rent, whereas a much less profitable per acre type of farm operation, like a hay operation, might not be able to afford through cash flow a hefty rental rate, so those rates are often lower. There's other costs and benefits that can be factored into a rental rate. There are, for example, many benefits that farmer tenants provide to landowners that are non-tangible or they're not included in the lease rate. For example, there might be a work share relationship where a farmer agrees to mow around field edges and or do other property maintenance, which might maintain or keep the property at a higher inherent property value. So that's a benefit to the landowner that might be discounted in rental rate or might be another type of arrangement. So I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this resource on the right here, this guide, is available at the UVM extension website. It's available for free download. We don't have print copies of this at this time. So again, what's reflected in a market rate? Market rates, by definition, is really supply and demand. In the end, it comes down to what a farmer can afford to pay or is willing to pay, and what a landowner is willing to accept as a rental rate. And that's really what market rates are all about. Soils, water, and infrastructure is kind of a key theme of this webinar in terms of assessing properties, factors into rental rates. You know, there's always going to be a range of what farmers are paying for rent in a particular area. So we can research rental rates, and we can talk about the online tools to do that, but they're only going to give us we'll talk about the NASS tool in a minute, but that's only going to give us a specific number as a benchmark, and oftentimes those rates are adjusted upward or downward according to what's available on site. If there's really prime soil on site, you might be at the much higher end of the range, whereas if most of the property is a wetland, obviously the market rate for that type of land is going to be a lot lower than the average rate in the area. We talked about the type of operation, and then property tax benefit programs are really important, really key in enabling the property owner to afford or it'll influence their willingness to accept a lower rental rate for farmland. There's various property tax benefit programs in all of the New England states that enable landowners to enroll their land if they keep the land in active agricultural forestry use. And there's often a very significant property tax benefit that landowners get from having their land in these programs. So they're oftentimes willing to pass that benefit on to farmer tenants in the form of accepting a lower lease rate. So it often, if you're looking to negotiate rent rate, it often helps to ascertain first whether or not the property or the land you're talking about is actually enrolled in one of these property tax benefit programs. So we'll talk about researching market rates now. First, by word of mouth, it's a very useful method. Can reveal some very valuable information, some pretty accurate information upon which you can base the rental rate of the property you're looking at. And farmers in the area, we talk about community members, but really it's going to be farmers in the area who can give you information about what they're paying per acre and per year. There might be agricultural advisors who frequently work in the area who have a good sense of what land is being rented for, and they can be consulted as well. With the caveat, again, that every property is going to be different, and you really have to assess each farm property using the various resources and tools that we've discussed throughout this webinar in order to determine what a rental rate should actually be compared to the average rate that you might find online or that you might hear about by word of mouth. So the National Agricultural Statistics Service, it's a branch of USDA, and NASS aggregates farmland rental data from all over the country. And sometimes they have enough data to do this by county, to publish rates by county, and sometimes they only have enough to publish it by state or region. But you can use this online tool to research rental rates in your area. So we'll just go through a short step-by-step. I just have some screenshots here. It's kind of a clunky process. It might, when you arrive at the website for the first time, it might not be obvious what to do. So hopefully this will help you in avoiding some of the frustration that I encountered the first time I got on this website. I'll teach you guys some tricks. So when you first get to the database, if you're looking for farmland rental rates, you go to the commodity pull-down. You see a series of pull-down menus. And go to the commodity pull-down menu and highlight rent. So what the website does after that is it will pull down it will expose different pull-down menus. The website, as you continue to highlight items in each of these menus, the website will continue to update itself and continue to give you different choices. So once you highlight rent, actually that commodity or that category pull-down menu to the right of commodity will show up. And that's when you can highlight expense. Now there are, as you can see, there are some other items there. Index for price paid and price paid, relative weights. Those have a lot to do with custom grazing arrangements, with pasture leases. And we won't get into the nuts and bolts of those right now. There's not a lot of data, actually. If you're looking at farmland in the Northeast, there's not a lot of data for prices paid. These are arrangements where a farmer might own animals and they're paying another farmer per head so that other farmer can graze their cattle, for example. Or it might be other pasture lease rates that are based on a per animal rather than a per acre value. So you can inquire about these, but I do suggest going straight to expense if you're looking for a benchmark for rental rates per acre of land. And so once you highlight expense, you can, well, let me back up a little bit here. You can see here, I've highlighted expense, and then in the data item category, you can see all of those data items, the rent, cash, cropland, expense measured in dollars per acre, and so on. And there's probably a dozen data items that popped up there after I highlighted expense in the category menu. What happens is those are the data items for all geographic locations, all years, and so on. NASS doesn't actually have data it's highly unlikely that they'll have data in the particular county or state that you're looking for all of these data items. So this is kind of a trick of the trade here. So to narrow in on the data that's really useful to you, which is basically the data that's available in the particular location, you can select a location first. Before you mess with the data item column there, or pull-down menu, just go straight to selecting your location where you're looking. So that's our next slide here. So I selected randomly Hampshire County in Massachusetts, and you can see after I selected the specific county, my choices in the data item pull-down menu are a lot fewer. So this is the data that's actually available for Hampshire County, Massachusetts, and you can see I've also selected the year 2014. So finally, you can select, the Get Data button is at the bottom of the screen. You can select that, and you're brought to the final page where you have the values. So the last column on the right for value is the dollar value, and then a couple columns over to the left, you can see a data item. So you've got the type of land for which there is data. So in this example here in 2014, $187 per acre per year is what irrigated cropland was rented for on average in this county. And then you've got some more data there for non-irrigated cropland. So this might be corn land. This might even be hayland that's considered cropland. That there is data for at $93 per acre per year. What this is not is total real estate value. So that I did clarify that with a NASS representative. So these are raw cropland or farmland values per acre per year. They're not whole farm real estate values or what they're renting for. And you can, if you're interested in whole farm real estate rental values, you can obtain that data through the U.S. Agricultural Census. Do some number crunching there. Or just contact a NASS representative. They're on call. They have a mission to make their data as useful as possible for the public. So they've often been very responsive. If you have questions about the data, just contact NASS. And that's all I had.
Great. Thanks so much, Ben. And I'm going to bring Kathy back on as well. So we've got a few questions that have come up throughout the webinar. I'm going to stick with the land rental rates just for a moment. So one question we have is asking about landowners using a cost-based approach to setting rents. How often is it that landowners use this cost-based approach, such as including depreciation and interest and repairs and maintenance, as well as taxes and insurance when determining rental rates?
I'd say it's very common for owners to consider property taxes. That's often the most tangible ownership cost that they carry for owning their land. You know, they get the bill every quarter, and they really know what they're paying for property tax. Some of the other costs of owning land, such as depreciation for structures and fencing and so on, or opportunity cost, those are less known, less tangible, and so they're often less talked about. And what happens is when you do an analysis of all of the costs of owning land, property taxes plus insurance plus interest on the mortgage or opportunity costs from tying up that capital, plus I don't know if we said property taxes and all of the elements of the Dirty Five equation. That there's an acronym that's used to help folks remember what property tax or all the ownership costs are. When you analyze all of those costs together, they often come out a lot higher than the prevailing farmland rental or market rental rates. And that's often due to the fact that the property might be in the property tax benefit program, which skews rates downward or so on, or just simply supply and demand what other farmers in the area are paying. So yes, it's definitely important to consider, but no, it's not the most common factor that determines the actual rate.
Okay, great. And another question here about financing. We had one comment basically saying that it's hard may be impossible to get conventional mortgage financing for farms. And I'm wondering if we have any suggestions on where to go for mortgages to buy or refinance farmland. Kathy, did you want to talk to that one a little?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So conventional financing can be hard. Typically, if it's a farm property that has a house with it, it would be looking for a residential mortgage, and yes, you might not be able to qualify. USDA, through its Farm Service Agency, has a government subsidized loan program, or several loan programs for farmers, particularly beginning farmers, those of you farming 10 years or less. And there are attractive loan rates and also guarantee loan programs and a down payment loan program in which the required down payment is also a lot less. Farm Credit Services also has a young, small, and beginning farmer program, and they look to do some attractive financing for farm property as well. Some community banks have been used by farmers, and without getting into it, Ben and I and another partner have been looking at the role of farmland investors in making farmland available and more affordable. We're in the midst of doing some research about which one of these more promising mission-driven investment models might be good partners for farmers. So the jury's still out on that, but stay tuned to learn about whether those are options. And I would say partnering with land trusts. Land trusts won't finance, but they will, by placing an easement, which we didn't talk at all about on this call. There are ways to make the land more affordable, which might make a mortgage more manageable, again, through those various loan sources. Ben, you might have something to add in terms of mortgages?
Well, there's also owner finance sales and land contracts. I can refer folks to the guide to financing the community supported farm,
Right.
which is a guide all about alternative financing of land and other farmland assets. That's available for download on UVM Extension's New Farmer Project website, the guide to financing community supported farm. And the other point I wanted to emphasize is that these agriculture lenders are great opportunities. They provide low interest financing, but records are important. It's important for the farm seeker, whoever's seeking financing from these lenders, to establish records. For example, a Schedule F that they're submitting to the IRS for kind of documenting the farm business's development, and that the entity that is seeking financing is actually a farm business. That's the best way to work with farm lenders. They need to know that you're wholeheartedly and also financially in the business of farming, and you've got experience as a manager.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. This is Kathy. Just to add, it's good that you remembered about the owner financing and land contracts. FSA does have a contract guarantee program as well, which makes which absorbs much of the risk that an owner might take on if he or she were to be financing the acquisition of a farm. And another strategy would be to arrange a purchase over time so that you're not sinking into a mortgage right off the bat.
Yep, great. So final question I have here, and we definitely have time for more questions. If anyone has them, please send them to me. How can we find out about chemical histories on properties we are assessing? Are there sources we should be searching besides talking to the current owners and neighbors? And how far back in time should a purchaser go, especially for those who wish to farm organically? I know that there are different online resources. In Massachusetts, there's something called Oliver GIS, which is like a kind of publicly available GIS map where you can go in and look at underground storage tanks, see proximity to any brown sites, that sort of thing. But I think your best bet, if you're serious about a particular property, is to go and approach NRCS. They are GIS experts, and they could really help you assess that. Kathy, Ben, do you have anything else to add?
So the University Extension soil testing labs and other private soil testing labs do testing. If you suspect that soils are particularly high levels of heavy metals, for example, you can do tests. You have to pay a little bit more money in conventional nutrient testing, but that is an option.
Great. So any other questions? I think that's all that I see here. Senator Kathy, has anything else come up to mind for you that you wanted to add on?
No, thank you.
All right, great. Well, if we don't have any more questions, then I suppose that's it for today. As I said, we're going to email out an evaluation in the next couple of days, and I'm going to also note a copy of this PowerPoint presentation with that, as well as a link to this recorded webinar. So thanks everybody for participating today. Thank you very much to Kathy and Ben for your help and participation and knowledge. If you haven't registered for our second version of our second webinar, that's on the nuts and bolts of farmland leasing, that's 2 weeks from today, please do that. We're sent out around it kind of in the same initial email, or always email me and I can send you a link as well. All right, thank you so much everybody and have a great day.